Hello everyone! Up to this point I have been sharing with you filled with updates, and it seemed that I was succeeding and everything was going according to plan. Today we're gonna break this pattern. Let me tell you about my pain. On September 7th, a week after the last video, I published a build with all the features of Milestone, all but one. I warned my patrons not to use aggressive monsters just yet, as bots can't figure out how to avoid them. They go ahead on the principle, I see the target, I see no obstacles. As a result, all their internal logic for choosing the best target completely loses its meaning. I stumbled upon this problem and decided to build a temporary build and buy some time. While someone was playing the unfinished version, I tried to add the missing logics. The main source of problem was the pathfinding. I used the most sophisticated asset that can be found on the store, the A-Star Pro. Despite the availability of documentation and guides and forum topics, it still leaves many questions unanswered. And even more questions are raised by the source code of this asset itself. In all my 10 years experience of programming practice, I have not worked with such a complex architecture. It would seem that such a powerful and popular asset, but it does not even allow me to determine whether a point is reachable or not. I made a feature that the wounded characters can rest, but every now and then they want to rest on a mountain or in a pond. I struggled with this for 2 weeks, until one day I opened the store and saw a new asset that looked solid. The idea to redo the entire logic of characters' movement no longer seemed to me so bad, as long as it worked. The asset I'm talking about was HPG Pathfinding. I bought it and began to examine it. Its design immediately seemed quite simple to me. First of all, its map consists of tiles. The grid of squares is much clearer than random triangles and pentagons in A-Star. Behold, I can finally be 100% sure which tile is walkable and which is not. There is a downside here that the asset has a flat map, and the characters only clinch to the ground, ignoring height differences, but this can be fixed later. Now I had to figure out how to implement aggression zones. The idea is that some bots should bypass monsters, because they are aggressive for their faction. But other characters should not do this, since their factions are friends. I can't mark the entire area around the monster as unwalkable, because then no one will be able to pass there. I studied the asset and found that each tile contains its own tag, and the agent can be configured whether he can move around this tag or not. The last problem was to make each tile capable of storing many different tags, not just one. Fortunately, the HPG source code is relatively simple, and I was able to quickly adjust it to my needs. Finally a victory, I thought. The next week started with a big disappointment. I started transferring the movement system from one asset to another on the project itself, and not on a simple test scene. So when I finished, I was able to test, and I was shattered. HPG was not designed at all for constant updating paths. It's more like a turn-based asset. That is, literally, if a unit had to chase a moving target, then it got into a stupor, because the path did not have time to calculate when it was time to change the destination already. You understand that the parallel movement of characters is the foundation of any MMORPG. 2 players run towards each other for a battle, or one runs away, the second chasing. It was all impossible. So I switched back to A-Star, which does a great job with parallel movement. I decided to try to move away from the guide, which, according to all pros and cons, advises me to use a recast graph as the type of the map. I changed the map type to a grid, despite the indicated disadvantages, which I will have to deal with later. But how can I repeat the same aggression zones with A-Star? The asset has support for cutting out a piece of land as well as assigning a tag to it. The problem is that the asset requires assigning a zone with a tag in advance, and not moving it anywhere else, which is completely inappropriate. Plus, just like HPG, one tile can only have one tag, and the maximum tag limit is 32. I thought I could edit the source code the same way I did it with another asset. 3 days later, still nothing. I just can't get through the confusing architecture of this source code. Every single thread leads nowhere. Every attempt to find the right piece of code was broken into endless inheritances in interfaces. I gave up this idea. I feel like I was walking in circles. I switched back to the branch with HPG because it can't be edited somehow. For several days I was working on solving the problems of recalculating paths, and virtually everything worked. I implemented pooling so that the character could run along the old path while calculating the new one. I have implemented numerous checks so as not to cause the calculation of the new path without an urgent need. I've implemented various timeouts to give each path time to calculate. It's time to test the work of AgriZone's avoiding feature, and it fails. Even a single monster spends too much time updating information about the area around him. It is enough to spawn 10 monsters and the frames per second will drop to a historical minimum. And I'm on fire again. I was almost ready to give up and postpone this feature for an indefinite period, but I decided to do everything I could this last week. I returned to the branch with A-Star Pro ACID again, and I methodically unraveled each skein by skein. Eventually, the source code succumbed to me. I managed to add my own tags inside the entire system, make each tile capable of storing any number of them, and also implement constant updating of the zones around the monster. I was also able to use the penalty system, which allows not to completely exclude the zone from the pathfinding, but to make it undesirable. This is very useful when the player cannot get to the target point without killing monsters standing in the way. I tested the system. It works. A month and a half after the publication of temporary build, I finally have a solution to the problem ready. Well, then it's a small matter. I implemented the distribution of aggro zones and penalties and redesigned the AI, because now it knows exactly where it can go and where it can't. I was able to get rid of the sequential actions of the players and just fill them with all possible actions from which they can choose based on the length of the path and the reachability to the destination. And I've added a few quality of life improvements that don't even make sense to mention. The final build was published a week ago. I'm finally closing the second milestone. I promised to show the characters window in the last video. Here it is. Everything you need is in front of your eyes: the stats of the character, his inventory and equipment. Also, information about the player himself will be added here, such as his mastery and desire to engage in one or another type of activity. You can watch how the game is played on the footage while I tell you my plans for the future. Milestone number 3 is officially opening. Its final goal is to implement all systems of construction and operation of ready-made buildings. I also include here the ability to generate and place your own lands, instead of my prepared ones. In the end, we will have the opportunity to create and fill the game world from scratch. I will need to buy enough assets with models to give players a choice. Therefore, if you believe in this project, consider supporting me on Patreon. Speaking of Patreon, there are some interesting changes there too. I want the development to be more transparent for everyone, so for 2 months now, all the posts with weekly changelogs are available for free. Every Sunday you can come in and check what have been done this week and what is the plans for the next week. But that's not all. The arena built from Milestone 1, in which you can create your own monsters, skills and make them fight, is now also available to everyone for free. If you wanted to get familiar with the combat system, which has not changed much yet, then you can. In addition, I have launched polls to vote which feature I should take to work in the near future. As I said earlier, after creating the foundation, I will be able to expand it in different directions. For many things, the foundation has already been laid, and now I will introduce feature after feature and publish new builds much more often. The milestones are focused on development a large fundamental feature, while in parallel I can afford to implement several small ones according to your requests. So if you want to influence the development process, you are very welcome to my Patreon. And that's all for today. Subscribe to the channel, to get the information gathered together about the latest stages of development. Add the game to your Steam wishlist so as not to miss its release. All the necessary links will be in the description. See you in the next video.